The Hindu Kush mountains are known as the Hindu slayers, and today I want to talk about how we came to believe this myth. My hypothesis for this presentation is that the Hindu Kush, being a slayer of Hindus, is a cleverly constructed myth by the zealous 14th century Moroccan writer Ibn Battuta. Namaste and welcome to Indian History and Archaeology. I'm your host, Dr. Lajwanti Shahani. In this video, I will also be briefly touching upon the descendants of Hindu slaves, the Sindhi or Sindhi, Luri, Luli, Koli, also the Dom and the Roma of Europe. So stay with us till the end and find out all the fascinating facts. If you find this video of value, then please do like and share it. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. Indian history has taught us about the dreaded Hindu Kush mountains as the killer of Hindus, with Kush being a soft variant of the Western or Persian Kaush, supposedly meaning to kill or a killer. I've done my research, and as far as I can tell, there is no such term as a killer of Hindus in the Persian language, both old and new. So the word Kush cannot be translated into the Persian language as to give the meaning killer. Strangely, however, everybody has accepted the term killer of Hindus without any questions. In fact, Nigel J.R. Allen, with decades of research expertise in the social history of the Hindu Kush, Himalaya, and Trans-Himalaya mountain region, had given two alternate meanings for the Hindu Kush, which are more probable. According to him, Kush is possibly a soft variant of the Persian Ku or mountain, which then gives us Hindu mountain as a possible meaning. Hindu being a geographical term, of course. The other meaning of Hindu Kush being sparkling snows of India. Ku or Ko is a commonly used word for mountains in this region. So as Allen has stated, for the Arab geographers and writers, Hindu Kush was the frontier boundary of India. My hypothesis for this presentation is that Hindu Kush, being the slayer of Hindus, is a myth cleverly created by the zealous 14th century writer Ibn Battuta, a Moroccan who is famous for his travelogue titled Rehla, My Travels. According to Ibn Battuta, millions of Hindu slaves were slaughtered in the blood-stained Hindu Kush mountains, referring to the brown mountain sides. These are the same mountain passes that he had crossed to come into India in the year 1333 CE. The same goes for many other travelers, for that matter, throughout history, barring mountaineers in the current time who also climbed the Himalayan peaks. Keep in mind that this was the only record throughout history of millions of Hindus being slayed in the Hindu Kush mountains. There is literally no other evidence to be found. Why would Ibn Battuta create this fictitious story? Was it to drive fear into the hearts of Indians in order to get them to surrender or convert? To gain posterity in history, or to boast about his Tughlaq master in India? Perhaps a mix of all. This was a few hundred years after the initial Islamic invasions, and Hindu rulers were still giving them a stiff resistance. This may also have been when the Mughals were making inroads, so it is possible that the Turks were trying to boast about their brutality. After completing his travelogue, Ibn Battuta practically disappeared from the Islamic historical context. He had already fallen out of favor with his Tughlaq master and was lucky to keep his head. Incidentally, while leaving India, his party was attacked by a group of Hindu fighters, and he barely escaped with his life for a second time. Now, here's my question: why would any slave master wipe out his prized profit even before reaching the marketplace? Think about it. These Hindu slaves were profitable for the Arab traders. Moreover, he would have put his own life in danger on these treacherous mountain ranges for nothing but the pleasure of killing. Does that make any sense to you? Don't get me wrong. In all probability, a vast number of enslaved Hindus did perish or lose their lives during their harsh journey through the winters in the mountainsides in torturous conditions. According to the Indian historian K.S. Lal, an estimated 80 million Hindus went missing between the period of 1000 to 1500 CE. Besides that, there are multiple records of Hindu genocide, but that is not what I am talking about today. What I'm saying here is that many of the Hindus who were supposedly massacred in the Hindu Kush survived, and their descendants are today spread across the world. Indian history in this region, particularly in Central Asia and the Hindu Kush, is thousands of years old, and it is completely different from this defeatist view that has been indoctrinated into our psyche, first by the Arab writers and then by our own historians. We have multiple evidences for this: geology, scriptures, archaeology, and oral history. The Hindu Kush range is a westward extension of the Himalayan range. It also has its origins in the Middle Jurassic period, which is around 160 million years ago. The Himalayas and the Hindu Kush emerged when the floating landmass of the Indian subcontinent collided with the Eurasian plate nearly 55 million years ago. I have talked about this in a previous video. You should check that out if you're interested in geology. The northern regions of both ranges feature Himalayan with snow and glaciers. From the accounts given by various mountaineers, it is clear that the Hindu Kush presents the same challenges for climbers as the Himalayan range. Loose cornices with hardened snow, unstable rocks, and powdered snow, all of which make for dangerous avalanches. But there is a huge difference here. Mountaineers climb peaks, while travelers have historically trekked through these passes, mainly the Bolan and Khyber passes. The Hindu Kush peaks range in heights of 20,453 feet, which is Kohinoor in Afghanistan, to 25,289 feet, that is Terichmir or Terichmir in Gilgit, and they are sparsely covered in trees such as the juniper. The valleys, on the other hand, are well irrigated and are home to a vast variety of lovely flowers. Rather, they used to be. The Hindu Kush range, with its multiple mountain passes, has since millennia served as a land route or passageway for travelers between Asia, the Indian subcontinent, Central Asia, and the West. In fact, these travelers included the earliest humans when the out of Africa movement of the human species took place. Homo sapiens, or modern humans, probably traveled this same mountain range around 80,000 years ago. In Vedic texts, the Hindu Kush mountain range is known as Uparisiena, and in Avesta, which was its counterpart in Iran or Persia, it was called Uparisaina. Not much difference there. In Persian mythology, we come across Sena or Simurg as a giant flying creature which symbolized the union between the earth and sky. In Vedic iconography, Siena, meaning the eagle or Garuda, is the Vahana of Vishnu. According to some researchers, the word Uparisiena suggests that Siena or Garuda brought Soma from across the mountain range. Another meaning could be that Garuda led the early Vedic people to the place where Soma was cultivated, possibly in the valleys at the other end of these mountains in Afghanistan into Central Asia. During the Bronze Age, the pre-Harappan and early Harappan land route to Mesopotamia, also into Central Asia, went through this region before 2600 BCE. The Hindu Kush is a rich source of lapis lazuli along with other precious minerals. We even have two smaller Harappan settlement sites in these high mountain ranges. Much later, the Chinese Silk Route, the Greeks, Romans, Mauryans, Kushanas, Huns, Buddhist monks, Mongols, and various other groups have also trekked across these mountains and their high passes. Throughout the early historic period, Buddhism was widespread in the Hindu Kush region of Afghanistan. This region also served as a base for the Mahayana Sangh, which had spread as far as Central Asia. One of these monasteries include the famous Bamiyan Buddhas, which were destroyed by the Taliban Islamists in 2001. When Alexander attempted to conquer the Indian subcontinent in the spring of 329 BCE, he brought part of his army through the Hindu Kush range. Apparently, he thought the Hindu Kush to be a part of the Caucasus Indicus. These are the greater and lesser, or major and minor, Caucasus mountain ranges of Central Asia. Indicus is Greek for of India, which was a corruption of Hind, which in turn was the Persian pronunciation for Sindh. Of course, there are a few references to this region, that is Sindh, in the Vedas, also given as Hind. The Zoroastrians in Persia identified the mountain range which begins near the Indus River or the river Sindhu as Hindu Kush or Hindu Ko. This was almost 3000 years ago. My point being, the name Hindu Kush is almost as old as the identification of the land and its people. It has nothing to do with the killing of Hindus. Clearly, that was a bogeyman used for generating terror amongst the people. Fun fact, Kush is the name given to a strain of cannabis, a sweet-smelling plant which is exclusive to the Cannabis indica variety, with a few variants within the plant species. It has been cultivated in the Hindu Kush mountains for thousands of years, and in the recent years, its trade even funded the Taliban. Could this have been the Somras which was forever lost to the Vedic gods after the Dasharajniya war? Maybe not, but we'll keep that for another time. The Arab invader of Sindh, Muhammad bin Qasim, had failed in his 2 attempts at sea battles to conquer Sindh, even with impressive flotillas. In his 3rd attempt in the year 712 CE, he laid a 3-pronged pincer attack. Besides a sea battle, he added a 2nd flank via the land route from Shiraz in Iran and a 3rd flank from the Hindu Kush. With all the warriors in Raja Dahir's army eventually killed, many of the barbarically ravaged Sindhi women were taken to Basra by sea to be sold as sex slaves in the bazaars. This included 2 daughters of Raja Dahir, the princesses Surya Devi and Parimal Devi, who were presented to the Umayyad Caliph Walid in Damascus, Syria. On a side note, the extraordinary beauty of Princess Surya Devi is said to have caught the eye of the Caliph, and he made advances towards her. But she used that to get her revenge against Qasim by implying to the Caliph about being disgraced by the general and therefore not fit for the Caliph. As a result of that, Muhammad bin Qasim met with a miserable death. However, the princesses were overcome by remorse over their action and, upon confessing to the lie, were also executed. Also, many Brahmins were taken as prisoners for translating Sanskrit scriptures, which were obviously also taken away. Possibly the descendants of these captives and slaves taken later as well from this region are today known as Sinti and Zat to the Arabs. In Sindh, these ethnic groups are known as Kolis and Jats. Later, in the 9th century, Mahmud of Ghazni brought both sides of the Hindu Kush mountain range under his control. For 33 years, he launched his campaign every spring to systematically raid and plunder kingdoms in North India. And then he would retreat to his base in the Hindu Kush, each time before the onset of the monsoons. Clearly, he did not want his cavalry to get bogged down in the flooded plains surrounded by raging rivers, when getting back to the safety of the mountains might not be possible. That would leave him vulnerable to counterattacks by the Indians. Another evidence we have of the Hindu Kush mountain range being used for westward travel of Indian origin groups are the Dom and Roma people, also known as the Domari and Romani gypsies. A few more ethnic groups, Luri, Luli, or the Jat and Koli, which I mentioned earlier, have been clubbed together with these people along with the Sindhis. They're called gypsies everywhere, but particularly in Europe, it is used as a derogatory term to persecute them. Gypsy being a corruption of Egypt, because some of these groups reached Europe from Egypt. Originally from central India, the Roma are said to have travelled outward via Rajasthan, where they possibly interacted with the Banjaras, and then moved via Punjab to Gilgit in the eastern Hindu Kush range, the Karakoram. The Dom people also trace their origin to central India and are said to have travelled after the Roma. These ethnic groups of Indian origin are said to have migrated to Europe between the 10th and 13th century CE. According to the Roma, they were pushed out of their homeland by the forces of Mahmud of Ghazni. But did these people leave India of their own accord? Or were they also captured and taken as slaves like the Sindhis? They have passed down their oral history through generations for 1,000 years. The present generation know about their Indian origins, but they don't speak about being captured or taken as slaves from India. They speak of their journey as having migrated, although they don't mention the routes they took, that is, the Hindu Kush or the Iranian plains. So, if we consider their perspective, these were out of India migrations taking place right in the middle of the worst of the invasions, when Hindus were being taken away as captives and being sold into slavery. Although both Roma and Dom peoples do speak about being in slavery, in fact, all these groups have lived in slavery during the past 1,000 years. You will see in a minute how their roots also appear to match. Some time ago, I had interviewed the author Saz Agarwal, where we talked about the partition of India in 1947 and the Hindu Sindhi diaspora experiencing inherited trauma for the original Roma and Dom groups to not have talked to their children about the atrocities of captivity and slavery. It could possibly be transgenerational trauma, and they've blocked out some of the painful parts of their past. We do know from the Islamic chroniclers like Ibn Battuta and Al-Biruni about how the invaders captured and transported hundreds of thousands of Hindus to be sold into slavery in Damascus, Syria. From there, they were taken further into European markets. Many captured Hindu slaves were also transported through a southern route, crossing the plains of Iran and Iraq to reach Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, Lebanon, and Palestine. In his recent article in the Sunday Guardian, aptly titled Roma Community Lost Children of the Great Indian Family, Zamir Anwar has referenced the Tariq al-Yamini, which was a war chronicle written by the secretary of Mahmud of Ghazni, Abu Nasr Muhammad bin Abdul Jabbar al-Utbi. According to Anwar, Mahmud of Ghazni had enslaved 50,000 people from Mathura and Kannauj in 1018 CE. They were sold as slaves in Kabul, Khorasan, Central Asia, and Baghdad. These slaves were, and I quote here, outstanding tinsmiths, ironsmiths, goldsmiths, and proficient craftsmen, artisans, warriors, musicians, and dancers, unquote. Mahmud exploited these skilled slaves for constructing his palaces and the Masjid-e-Jami in Ghazni. According to Anwar, these slaves were the forefathers of the Roma community. Interestingly, these enslaved warriors joined the Seljuk Turkmens, who went on to defeat the Ghaznavids in the Battle of Dandanakan in 1040 CE. When the Ottoman Empire expanded towards India in the 14th century, the Roma community spread out to Europe. The Dom slaves who were taken through the Iranian route served in Arabian countries and eventually made their home across the Middle East and Africa. Many of the Roma people were also sold into slavery in Europe. Slavery was abolished in Europe as recently as 1856, and after that the Roma settled there. I said settled, but except for the Roma, all the other communities have been nomads ever since they left India around 1000 years ago. They were singled out and discriminated, either treated with grave suspicion of criminal behavior and constantly forced to move on, or simply treated so unfairly that they had no choice but to move. And this is happening even now. With the foundation of the German Empire in the late 1800s, these gypsies came under constant scrutiny for social crimes. They've all faced racism historically, but the Roma and Sinti groups suffered the worst during the Holocaust. Nazi Germany under Hitler wiped out thousands of them in concentration camps in Europe and the USSR. This includes the infamous Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp, which had a specific gypsy camp within it. It is estimated that between 200,000 to 500,000, or 2 lakhs to 5 lakhs, Roma and Sinti men, women, and children were murdered by the Nazis. Many more were used as forced labor and subjected to cruelty through horrific medical experimentation or forced sterilization. If that's not enough, studies have found that children of survivors of these concentration camps have been affected by epigenetic disorders. Of course, such studies were only carried out on the Jewish survivors and their children. No such work has included the gypsies. As you can tell, the discrimination still continues. The impacts of this genocide on the Roma and Sindhi people have still not been fully recognized. And to add to it, wherever they've been given a memorial, these have been vandalized by locals. Even today, there are many personal accounts of the Roma, Sindhi, and Dom people to be found on social media today, which describe individual stories and stories of the communities, of ongoing discrimination, which in turn keeps them on the fringes of the society. According to the European Union Agency for Fundamental Human Rights, 1 in 3 Roma in Europe are unemployed and 90% live below the poverty line. Active discrimination by European governments, including France, in this day and age, has also been spotlighted by Amnesty International. These descendants of the ancient Indian diaspora have, however, spread across the globe. They even have their own flag with the Dharma Chakra with 16 spokes as its emblem. While their nomadic nature means that their population figures are mostly absent in official census, their numbers in Europe alone are estimated to be around 10 to 12 million today. That's right. Across the pond in the US, their population is about 1 million strong, with another 800,000 or 8 lakh Roma in Brazil, whose ancestors were deported from India by the Portuguese. Clearly, a large number of the earlier captives transported across the Hindu Kush have also survived today and go on to grow in numbers to populate almost every country on every continent except for Antarctica. Over the centuries, they have adopted local religions but held on to their ancient culture, arts, and even language. Besides their DNA, which has been tested and confirmed their Indian roots. While most of the Roma in Eastern Europe today are Catholic, Orthodox Christian, or Muslim, those living in Western Europe or the US have adopted the Catholic or Protestant faith. It would be fair to say that these conversions may sometimes be forced or a social necessity, because elements of the Hindu rituals are also visible in their culture through the worship of Saint Sarah la Kali in France. Patron saint of the Roma, she is also called Kali Sara in the Romani language, and people flock to her church every year for veneration. The rituals are very similar to Durga Puja, with new clothes for the saint, candles lit throughout the night, and jewelry offered in thanksgiving. The idol of Kali Sara is carried out to the sea in a procession every September for a ceremonial dip. The Romani language traces its origins in Sanskrit, just like the Indian languages. As for the Domari language, it sounds almost the same as any other Indian language. I'll attach video links in the description box below and you can hear them speak for yourself. I hope this video has helped in busting the myth of the Hindu Kush, and I will try to connect with a few people from this ancient Indian diaspora for a future video. And as always, if you would like to do your own research, you'll find links in the description box below the video as well. I'll leave you with a short clip of some unexpected, famous personalities of Roma origin. Hollywood actors Elvis Presley, Rita Hayworth, and Charlie Chaplin. British actor Sir Michael Caine, Spanish painter and sculptor Pablo Picasso, and Spanish flamenco dancer Carmen. Thank you for watching. Namaste.